What is going on? Today's video is an answer to a question that we get quite often right now. The past few months we've gotten it especially, and I just kind of want to talk through, is it a good time to buy? For whom is it a good time to buy? All of that. We're going to dive in. I'm going to try to talk through the nuances of what, makes it a good or bad time to buy. Let's do it. How's it going, y'all? My name is Jesse Lynch, and I run the hardest working real estate team in the game. We're called To the Twin Cities, and you can check out our website, tothetwincities.com. But you're on YouTube, and this YouTube channel is all about helping you find a place to call home, a place to land here in the beautiful Twin Cities of Minnesota. And that's whether you're buying a house for the first time or relocating here from a different city, state, country, planet, dimension, whatever it is. First-time home buyers, relocations. That's what we do. That's what we do better than anybody else. That's what this channel is all about. So if either of those things, any of that appeals to you, then do me a favor, do yourself a favor, subscribe to the channel and click that little bell so you can get notified every time we put out videos like this, or like the virtual tour videos that we do, or like those new experience videos that we just started putting out. And if you wouldn't mind, I say this every video, but I mean it, especially give the video a thumbs up. Say something nice or helpful or funny or whatever in the comments. I would appreciate it very, very much. That stuff, it's helpful not only to me and this real estate team, it's helpful to other people like yourselves who are looking for this kind of information. Sort of sends it up the top of the algorithm, and I appreciate that very, very much. We work very, very hard on these videos and, do our best to make sure that these videos are awesome and provide tons of value to people like yourselves. Today's video, we're talking, is it a good time to buy? For whom is it a good time to buy? And yeah, I don't know. There's a lot going on there. It's like a loaded question, kind of, but let's dive into it. Okay, first of all, I just want to preface this with one of my personal pet peeves is how real estate agents, brokerages, whatever, realtors, have a way of, not all of them, but some have a way of sort of always saying, it's a good time to use me as your, realtor. They love doing that kind of stuff. And that's not what this is. You can go back on my channel and we have tons and tons and tons of videos. I do that almost never. I think, I don't know, I don't like it, so I'd be shocked if I did. And to the extent that I do, I would like to think that I back it up with, it's good for folks who are in this situation, or here are some positive aspects of it. Like over the past 2 years, it was a good time to buy because interest rates were cheap. That's true, but that also led to, among other things, COVID certainly shook the world up and led to a pretty, unexpected sort of scattering of people across the world, country, etc. And that led to a lot of just unexpected demand, in my opinion. But then also the lowering of the interest rates. The Fed lowered the interest rates at like the beginning of 2020. That led to sort of a flood of people wanting to take advantage of those interest rates. The first of which was like refining loans, because it was so early in COVID that they, a lot of people weren't buying right away at the beginning of COVID. In fact, certain states were completely shut down. You couldn't do showings, etc. But you could refi a home, and people were doing that a lot, so much so that even though the Fed had the rate extremely low, sort of the appetite of the investors who use that Fed interest rate ended up getting, they're like, well, we're full. I know that we can get money for these extremely low rates, but we don't have an appetite for that money, or ultimately we don't have an appetite for, folks like yourselves refinancing or buying, a home. There was a while where they actually sort of like pushed up the interest rates because they sort of wanted to pump the brakes, and then they came back down. We're very low for a year and a half consistently, and the the housing market was very poppin'. And I think a lot of people know that, but a lot of people, sort of don't really know what that means. That's something that we like to talk through with all of our clients is, okay, you may have heard blank about the market, but what does that actually mean for you? So the past, 2 years, it was, so you've heard the market's hot, but what does that actually mean? What does that translate to? When you're looking at Zillow, which is wrong all the time, what does that actually translate to in reality? And Luckily, we are a busy real estate team, not a huge real estate team. I like to keep it sort of tight-knit with people who know what they're doing. And, because of that, we can sort of communicate and get a really good sense of what's going on. What does it take to get an offer accepted, etc. But that's not what this video is about. This video is about, is right now a good time to buy? And I feel like there are some people who watch a video like this who are actually never going to buy anything, and they're sort of waiting until things get better. And it probably, in my opinion, for most first-time home buyers, there is not a brighter future at which homes are going to be available at a deep discount. I just don't think that's the case. And to the extent that it is, interest rates will likely be higher. So I know a lot of people are watching this and they will almost want permission from me to either buy or not buy. And it very much depends on your situation. But in general, I believe it is a good time to buy. I actually just closed on a home, and this isn't, I hope it's a good time to buy because I just closed on a home. I actually do believe that going forward, it's not going to get cheaper for the average buyer. I tend to think home prices are going to continue to go up over time for, the foreseen future, right? Pending any other crazy 2007-ish crashes. But the conditions on the ground are a lot different than they were in 2007. The types of loans, the sort of predatory lending and all that happening in 2005, 6, 7, whatever, the early 2000s. It's not here, at least not with any of the lenders we work with. There is much tighter restrictions. And so we think that to the extent that home prices are going up, it is a fairly authentic rise in sort of a change in demand, but also, as I think probably everybody knows, there's a good amount of inflation happening. And that ultimately has caused the cost of building a new home to rise. And that inflation has led to materials being considerably more expensive. And by materials, I mean building materials. So things like lumber, like, roofing materials, like sheeting. That was so expensive during COVID. Like an OSB sheet, I think got up to over $40, and they're usually like 10. And they're all over houses. The exterior of a house is like sheeted entirely in that. So that adds a considerable amount of money to, building a home. But so ultimately, this sort of inflation, some of that was a very strange, almost like inauthentic inflation caused by a lack of supply because of supply chain issues, because, for example, a lot of the lumber that we get in the US comes from overseas, and because of COVID and shipping and all that, everything got all jammed up, which meant that what little supply we had went for a premium and was more expensive. Now, a lot of that seems to be leveling out. The Fed has raised the rate on, borrowing, which doesn't directly coincide to what your rate is. It is tied to it, but when the Fed raises the rate, that doesn't mean that a mortgage rate or an interest rate on a mortgage goes up to exactly that or exactly in step with that. That's a slightly different thing. I'm not going to go into that, but nonetheless, typically when the Fed raises the rate of mortgages goes up with it, albeit not directly in line with it. But all of the sort of shaking up that happened with the low interest rates and the supply issues, etc., what that led to was an extreme sort of seller's market. And when you hear somebody say a seller's market, that basically means that the terms and the market is very much in favor of the sellers because there is way less supply than there is demand. Way fewer sellers than there are buyers looking to buy, which means that things get bid up. Similar to OSB paneling for a home. What little supply there is becomes a premium, and so it becomes worth more. And it is my belief that lowering of the interest rates affects one category of the population more than anybody disproportionately, and that is the folks with fewer means, the poor, the lower middle class. Because if let's say your budget was, some arbitrary number, I don't want to use a real number. Most people's budgets are sort of set with the interest rate in mind because most people are thinking about their monthly payment. And in fact, that is typically how you qualify for a mortgage, based on your monthly payment in relation to your debt to income. So if you are looking at a home with a monthly payment of here when the interest rates were very, very cheap, and then the interest rates on the same home go up by 2% or so, which they did, then that same home becomes more expensive. But if this is the top of your budget, then what happens is the home that you were looking at now becomes more expensive than it just was because of interest rates, which means if there are no homes cheaper underneath that is in terms of price, then you just fall out of competition, right? And so that is unfortunately what that sort of led to. The sort of inverse to that is what was happening while interest rates were low, which is that prices were going up, interest rates were low. But, if you had looked at a home that was priced here, X hundred thousands of dollars a year ago, it is now priced here. Interest rates are the same, but the purchase price is higher. So people who waited got priced out. But there was, at the beginning of 2022, there was a month or two where you might have been looking at one type of home, one price, and then all of a sudden you were priced out of that. So a certain amount of people just dropped out because, well, they wanted that home that was worth that much. But while the affordability factor got worse for most people because of interest rates going up, home prices did not sync with that. That is my belief of what is generally going to happen overall. Things might soften a little bit, and that generally means that home prices will get a little bit lower over time. I don't think in this market, I don't think that's really going to happen too much just because of the amount of demand, but I don't have a crystal ball. Again, I know that I'm getting a little off track. I'm sort of talking about what it was like, but I think that's important to understand what it is currently like and why it might be a good time to buy now. The last 2 years, to win an offer, you typically, for the most part, you had to offer considerably higher over list price by like a lot, by tens and tens of thousands of dollars. I mean, 100 would be pretty wild, but it happened. But generally, tens of thousands of dollars. And along with those very, very high prices over list price, what we were also seeing was very, very competitive terms getting offered. Because again, if 20 people are going after the same home, then the term that wins is going to be extremely competitive. It had to be 20 other people. Story time, I actually had a client who was awesome, absolutely loved them, and they were one of 56 offers on a home in a suburb of the Twin Cities. And they had looked at a lot of houses and made a lot of very competitive offers only to lose out because they were generally on the sort of cheaper end of home prices, which becomes fairly competitive because there's not a lot of homes in that price range. Real quick story time, actually. I was helping some clients. This is probably a year and a half ago or something like that. I was helping some clients who won an offer on a home that had 56 offers on it, which is pretty wild. But it was definitely in the cheaper sort of price range of this market. And so there was and it was priced really competitive to where they had seen so many houses and made so many offers at a sort of similar price range that when one came up that was priced actually very low, they were very, very quick to jump on it. And so they had looked at so many homes and made so many offers that were very competitive. They saw a home that was underpriced and they offered comparable to what they had been offering on the appropriately priced houses, and they won. 56 offers, that is wild, but that's a sort of supply and demand metric. But in those offers that people were making with all that competition, the terms become extremely, extremely competitive, right? And people start getting really creative with their offers. For example, sort of like earnest money can be, very extravagant, very high numbers. Sometimes people were making earnest money non-refundable if they were to get it under contract. People were getting sort of clever with inspections and all sorts of different, ways of making that look juicier to the seller, but also things people were doing that financially became difficult for a lot of first-time home buyers. They were offering things that are called appraisal gap coverages, which is fundamentally, you're saying if the home appraises under what we agreed to pay for it, we'll pay some cash to pay the difference. And a lot of first-time home buyers have enough cash to pay the down payment, maybe enough cash to do down payment, closing costs, and have some money left over but very few have, considerably less have money for the down payment, the closing costs, and $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 in the event the home appraises under, purchase price. And those are things that are, become very, very difficult for a lot of first-time home buyers. But this is all to say that what we're seeing right now, you don't need all that. And so while the downside currently is that interest rates are higher, the upside is that you are not necessarily paying all of this extra sort of cash and using all of these, creative and sometimes risky, terms to win the offer. For example, non-refundable earnest money or getting clever with inspections. And while some of that is still going on for certain types of houses, in general, there's if you don't have that, you can find a great house where you can have down payment. You can even use down payment assistance programs to come out of pocket with way, way less money, which a year and a half ago, that was considerably more complicated, trickier to pull off. So again, I'm gonna kind of hammer home that to me, the best reason that it's a good time to buy right now is that there's a lower level of competition, okay? And so for a lot of people who, again, didn't have the sort of cash on hand, the means to make these very, very competitive offers, or even maybe like the risk, portfolio, like the ability to sort of stomach that risk, then now in this market, it's a much more kind of normal transactional market. I would say that it still very much is, a seller's market. It still favors sellers. There is more demand than there is supply, but that has gone from being just wildly, out of balance to considerably closer to imbalance. It's still healthy, but I would say it's much closer to a healthy seller's market than it was the past 2 years. So for the people watching this I actually have another video called How Much Does It Cost to Buy a Home? And that video applies now more than it did in the last sort of 2 years. I made the first one, I think, I made the first one a while ago, but there's a new one that's out, and it's still similar information, and it's sort of like how much cash do you need to buy a home? And that is actually, much closer to a realistic picture now than it was maybe 6 months ago. It was possible back then, but you had to be considerably more targeted, and, we're good at that stuff. And so, that's cool, but you had kind of fewer options when it came to purchasing. Now, you still don't have, if you don't have any sort of cash or very little cash to work with, your options are still somewhat limited. I think they always will be in that case. But I would say it's generally very good news for home buyers, first-time home buyers who don't have a lot of cash to work with, or who intend to use a down payment assistance program or something like that. Another sort of positive scenario that it's a considerably better time to buy now than it was is if you have any sort of complicated contingency on the home purchase, most of which that comes to mind is going to be contingent on the sale of your home, right? There was a while where that got very sticky, where people had a home to sell, they had a lot of equity, but they felt like, well, where are we going to go, right? It's very difficult to buy a home. So yeah, I can sell this house, but then how do I get another house, right? And that was, in fact, quite tricky. And now there's still, that is still a hurdle contingent on the sale of your home, but it's a less impassable hurdle. And you still have to target, and be sort of targeted and sort of tactful and make offers that are competitive otherwise, but it's considerably easier to get that offer accepted than it was even 6-7 months ago. It's pretty wild to see, but as a team that helps a lot of buyers, it's nice. Honestly, it's a little easier. It's a little more like shopping and less like running through a gauntlet. But that said, if you are both a buyer and a seller, then you also are sort of experiencing the evening out. So while 2 years ago, whatever, year and a half ago, it was considerably easier to sell your home. You just put it on the market, boom, it's probably gone in multiple offers right away, unless you wildly overpriced it or it was like, you know, kind of like a rough house, right? But now you have to price it, you know, accurately, competitively to sort of get, you know, a good price. That said, we don't see prices falling right now. So if it was worth, you know, a certain amount at the beginning of 2022, we don't think that they have, you know, prices have dropped and the value of your home has gone down dramatically. But your ability to get a very competitive offer with terms may have dropped a little bit. So again, a year ago, 2 years ago, you may have been able to put a home on the market and say, this home, you know, the purchase of this home is contingent upon me, the seller, finding a home of my choice and getting it under contract. That is going to be more difficult to do now than it was then, because again, the demand has evened out to some degree. But while it becomes slightly more difficult to get whatever you want as a seller, it gets slightly easier to get what you want as a buyer. Now, in terms of what potentially makes it not a good time to be a buyer, I said earlier, interest rates, right, make it less affordable to buy the same home. But I do think that gets leveled out a little bit by, you know, yeah, you're paying 1-2-ish% higher interest rate than you were previously. But, you know, if you were buying right now at the lower interest rate, chances are the price would be listed at the same amount and you'd be offering tens of thousands of dollars higher, which is close to leveling out in terms of your monthly payment. You would just be paying a higher purchase price and a lower interest rate, and it would be close to leveling out. It's kind of the whole idea of what the Fed is doing. So on the one hand, you're paying a higher interest rate. So that is not the most exciting thing. And to what other degree that it's negative or not a great time to buy is all kind of down to speculation, right? There's sort of the idea, there's a notion that prices may dip in the very near future. That said, with what has sort of happened to home prices following, you know, a sudden increase, maybe not sudden, but a sharp increase in interest rates, to me, that shows promise that, in fact, you know, the Fed raising the interest rate isn't going to like crash the market. It's actually sort of quelling it, right? It's sort of tamping it down, where the rise, you know, the rate of increase was very, very sharp, and now I think it's sort of rounding off, but I still think it's generally headed upward. Again, I closed on a house, you know, 2 months ago, and that, you know, that is my belief in general. So while it wasn't a very good time to be a buyer, it was stressful and it was hard 2 years ago. If you bought at the beginning of COVID or something, and you look like a genius now because you have so much equity in the home because you bought at a relatively kind of normal time, and then you had this steep rise due to a ton of factors. So again, you made a lot of money in theory in equity over the last 2 years. So, you know, I don't think that's going to happen in the next 2 years, right? If you've seen people who are like, yeah, I made like $100,000 in the last year or two, don't expect that. It's probably not going to happen. That was a very, you know, wild time, a sort of fortunate time for those people, but it was also it felt very risky. Having helped a lot of people during that time, it felt like a very uncertain time. The water were somewhat murky, and so I think the people who took the risk were actually rewarded in this case. So now as you're buying, you will not see this, you know, sharp appreciation that people have seen in the last couple of years, but I still tend to think you will. And there's also a thing that lenders are saying. I'm always somewhat hesitant to listen when lenders say things like this because of things that happened previously. But for one, I have a lender whom I trust a lot, and this is sort of how I look at it. You will hear lenders saying things like, well, the Fed say that they're going to raise rates now and drop them in 2 years, so you can always refinance, right? And that phrase, so you could always refinance, has me, I don't know, a little bit like, oh, I don't like that, because that's what people were saying in 2005 when they were giving these very risky ARM mortgages, which is adjustable rate mortgages. Again, I probably said this in many videos. If you haven't watched The Big Short, you should. It's a great movie. But what was happening was people were giving out these adjustable rate mortgages that were very risky. And it basically in the first 5 years, or even sometimes it was 1 year or 2 year, you had a very low interest rate. Some of them were negative interest rates where they were giving you money that doesn't exist anymore. And they were saying like, well, home prices will continue to go up. So they're speculating a ton. And you'll always be able to just refinance, right? So you'll always be able to refinance. That has me feeling not super great, but I do want to sort of like look at that and help you understand how I think like there is, even if that's not true, generally I think it's a good time to buy. Even if those interest rates go up in 2 years, even though the Fed is saying they think they'll go down, well, then you have a great interest rate, right? If in 2 years interest rates go up or continue to go up or something, then whatever you buy at right now, your rate will be considerably better than that. So the affordability, you'll lock in that affordability, whereas if the interest rates continue to rise, the affordability will go down for the people buying later. So, or the interest rates will go down, like the Fed is saying, and like you'll hear some lenders saying, at which point, cool, then you actually can refinance. So generally, it's all very positive. To me, the one potential thing that could happen, it makes me, I'm saying it like not a huge deal, but it would be a huge deal, but catastrophic. But if home prices drop dramatically because the values go down because of something like 2007, 2008, 2009, to some degree, then the whole sort of economy is a mess. And then I don't know, personally, my risk tolerance tells me, okay, I just closed on a house. If the whole, economy goes wonky and something were to happen to that house or I were to get foreclosed on, would I be better off if I had been renting for the previous 2 or 3 years? I don't know. I don't really see that much, but again, that's my risk tolerance and I understand if yours is different. But that would be a catastrophic problem, right? And I don't see that coming. I've looked into this a lot. A lot of people that I'm paying attention to don't see that coming. Even people who I think of as being sort of fiscally very, very conservative in their sort of outlooks seem to be thinking that in fact home prices will continue to go up slower than it was, and even if interest rates go up, then okay, well then you're better to have bought now. That said, I generally think, and this isn't financial advice, but within my risk tolerance, I would not personally take an adjustable rate mortgage right now, especially on a primary home. I don't think I would, because I want to lock in that sort of affordability factor. And moving forward, if interest rates do go up and I can't refi, then I look like a genius. If they do go down, then I paid a little bit more over the course of the next couple years. But for the sort of safety of that fixed rate, I think I'll take that, right? I'd rather pay a little bit more at a fixed rate than, a lower rate with higher risk, especially again, in my primary home, which for most of you watching this, most first-time home buyers, all first-time home buyers, fundamentally, the home you're buying is your primary home. I'd like to finish this video with sort of what I see as one potential sort of area of opportunity for first-time home buyers that was a very difficult sort of realm to get into previously, and that's new builds. A lot of people love the idea of getting into a new build. If they can afford it as a first home is another story, but a new build townhome, something like that, and sometimes new build single family homes, depending on sort of, financial trajectory. But in general, right now is an easier time to buy a new build. We have relationships with some actual builders who can build custom homes, who do beautiful homes from like ultra modern to sort of like the farmhouse thing. Have pretty good relationships with a few builders who really are very good. They're going to be on the higher end. And then kind of the cheaper end is going to be like the big box brands like a Lennar, right? And nothing negative, you know, I'm not going to say anything negative about any of that, but in general, you as a buyer of a new build are going to have an easier go of it. There was a while where new builds were a year out or something. They were so far away from actually being able to buy it. And while that's still true, we are seeing considerable more inventory that's actually available to buy and to close on and to live in much sooner than, you know, an empty lot that hasn't even begun and it's just basically like a spot on a map and you're like, well, you'd be there. It's considerably closer to where you can actually buy that. So that's kind of the last thought that I wanted to say in terms of like, is it a good time to buy? And I hope this video was concise enough. I know that I talked about, you know, other times, but if you have never bought a house, you don't know what makes it a good time to buy a home, etc. So I think that was important. But as always, thank you for watching. If you are thinking about buying a home here in the Twin Cities, get a hold of us. We will crush it for you. You know, from, you know, first-time home buyers looking for a fixer-up in, you know, the city for the cheapest end of the home market, to condos, to townhomes, to, you know, luxury homes, to luxury new builds. We, like, the team kind of has it all covered. So love for you to reach out to us and we will crush it for you. Again, you can go to our website, tothetwincities.com. We have a contact form there that you can fill out in 30 seconds or less, or you can shoot us an email directly to info@tothetwincities.com. They lead to the same inbox, so it is completely up to you. And if you have not done so yet, actually check it out. We have a new Airbnb, a short-term rental to offer in Minneapolis. It's something that we spent a ton of time, poured our hearts into to make it just an absolutely peaceful, relaxing, and just an awesome stay, an awesome example of what life in the Twin Cities can be. So we're gonna put that down in the description, or you can shoot us an email to stay@tothetwincities.com if you wanna book privately. That's certainly something that we can accommodate. The home is called The Place Between the Lakes, and I really, you know, we've had it booked for a little bit now. People have been really enjoying it. We've absolutely loved sort of hosting it. So I say this every video, but if you have not done so yet, subscribe to the channel, click the bell so you can get notified when we put out videos like this. And if you wouldn't mind, give the video a thumbs up, say something nice in the comment, say what's up, you know, I don't know, say something helpful, friendly, funny, etc. Favorite movie suggestion. Would love a movie suggestion. I'll throw one out. Big Short, already did. All right, y'all. Take it easy. We'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.